Hi everyone, I'm Amber. There are a lot of rumors about me at school, and they are not the most pleasant for me. And all because I have the biggest butt. Do you think this is a good thing? Then listen to my story and you will draw your own conclusions. Do not forget to write your opinion in the comments, like the video, and subscribe to the channel. Life at school is not easy. There are criteria by which you are evaluated. It's easier for guys. You're either a popular athlete or a quiet loser. But for girls, it's much more complicated. We are judged by character, appearance, even connections. There's a girl in my class. She's the principal's daughter. Everyone avoids her, constantly thinking before talking to her. Yes, maybe they're afraid of her, or they respect her, or they just don't want her to report everything to daddy. Sometimes I envy her because she has a quiet, measured life. I'd like one too, but that's not what I have. You'd be surprised if I told you that I'm popular too, but I'm not one of the 4 local rich people. Nature has given me something very big. The fact is that since birth, I have had a big butt. You will say that there are problems much worse than this. Considering that now many girls work out to try to achieve this, I would like to get rid of it. In general, it all started in childhood. My mother could not find any clothes that fit me because I stupidly couldn't fit into any pants. They got stuck on my buttocks. My mother had to buy pants several sizes larger, sew them at the waist, and shorten the length. She said it was funny, but it wasn't funny to me at all. For this reason, I wore skirts and dresses that there were no problems. I'm not even talking about the underwear that my mother bought for me as a teenager, but sometimes even the skirts didn't save me. My butt bulged out like a sail. I felt like a sheep, which is what they called me at school. The older I got, the more rumors were spread about me. Everyone stared at my butt, turned around to look at me. At those moments, I wanted to sink into the ground. When I was 13, I found a way to deal with this stress. I started eating. I ate everything I could find in the refrigerator at home, ate at school, and ate on the way to school. I especially wanted to eat in public when I was the center of attention. In general, after 2 years, I became even bigger. And all because the calories I ate went exactly where I didn't want them to go. At the age of 15, the school chairs were so small for me that 2 chairs were placed for me as an exception. It was so humiliating, but I couldn't just sit on one. My classmates took photos surreptitiously, distributed them, and discussed them in loud whispers. All I wanted was to be left alone. And only my mother said that this isn't bad, but on the contrary, it's a matter of pride. A woman's curves are very beautiful, she told me, but I didn't think so. A year later, when teenagers reached the peak of the hormonal jump, the guys began to get handsy. They could not pass by me just like that. They always tried to touch or pinch me. Then there were rumors that I had some kind of augmentation surgery, but that's nonsense. Allegedly, they wanted to make sure that it was natural. But no one ever asked me how I felt about it. It was hard carrying a load from behind. After a while, varicose veins appeared on my legs and my mother and I had to treat them. And then I met a guy on the internet. His name was Clay. I didn't post a photo below the waist, and he liked me. He came to my city 2 months later, moved with his family, and came to my school. When I first met him in the hallway, he was so happy, but then he saw my whole body. He slowed down and then said hello, and he couldn't take his eyes off my lower body. Everyone noticed this and started laughing. I couldn't stand it and ran home. I asked my mother to transfer me to another school, but she wouldn't even listen. After all, it was the best school in the city. Then I asked for a reduction operation, but my mother was against me going under the knife. A day later, Clay came up to me again. He apologized 100 times and then offered to take a walk with me. At first, I didn't want to, but he talked me into it. During the walk, I learned that Clay is an amateur photographer. He invited me to participate in a photo session, and before I declined, he showed me some pictures of his work. They were not just normal girls. Some were full, some didn't have a leg, an arm, but they looked just amazing in the pictures. I take these photos so they can see themselves from the outside and understand how beautiful they really are. Just like you. You are more beautiful than any girl I know, and I want you to see it, he told me, and I agreed. We had a photo shoot out in nature. At first, I was embarrassed, but then I relaxed and it gave me confidence. The very next day, the pictures were displayed on his page on social networks. Clay has about 1 million followers, and they were all crazy about my photos. I woke up that day as a celebrity. At school, I was already perceived differently, treated with respect, and from that moment on, I never heard any mockery against me. A few photos changed my life so much. Clay let me know that I was beautiful, much more beautiful than anyone who had ever slandered me. I finally realized this and accepted myself. I was no longer shy about wearing pants. I was no longer shy about my body. I was even proud of it. So, a lot depends on our own perception. And if you doubt yourself, just look from the outside and love yourself. Then the people around you will never dare to offend you again, because you will start to respect and appreciate yourself. Do you agree with my opinion? If so, please write why. And if not, give at least one reason not to love yourself. Hello everyone, my name is Lisa. I have a story related to my sister, Lynn. The fact is that since childhood, we did not get along with each other. We always competed. I don't even know why it happened, but it was terrible. Our whole life was like a race with nowhere to go. Well, now I will tell you about everything in more detail. And you watch, do not forget to like the video, share my story with your friends, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel. This is my sister, Lynn, and we've had different interests since we were kids. Lynn and I were at loggerheads every minute. For as long as I can remember, we haven't been able to play games together, share food, clothes, or even a room. We fought so hard that Mom and Dad bought a house that had 2 separate rooms, for me and for my sister. As soon as it came to what we were going to watch in the evening, there was a struggle between Lynn and I. She liked one thing and I liked another, but sometimes I thought she really liked the same things I did, but she was just doing it to get on my nerves. Our parents clutched their heads, did not know what to do, and as time went on, we grew up. Over the years, we talked less and less, only doing things that infuriated each other. I knew my sister was jealous of my figure. I was more slender, I had straight legs, gorgeous hair, nails, I dressed well, and always looked spectacular. This infuriated Lynn even more. Maybe sometimes I did it on purpose, knowing how she's sensitive about her height and slightly bulging tummy. Thanks to my appearance, I quickly found a boyfriend. He was a rich football player. He had already started his career and we started dating. Ben won the heart of more than just me and my mom and dad. He was good-looking, successful, and rich. My parents and I weren't rich, but now I could afford everything. Lynn, in turn, when she found out that I now have such a guy, began to bite her nails even more. She was really freaking out about it because she still wasn't in a relationship. Then, right after school, she went to law school, said that she would work as a lawyer. I laughed at her, wished her luck, and told her that one day she might be able to climb the career ladder, but in the meantime, she would have to work as a free lawyer in the local city court. I knew it hurt her, but we had that kind of relationship, so it was okay. I thought about doing the same thing, but Ben changed all my plans. He proposed to me, and I couldn't refuse, especially since I loved him. I told my parents, and then I wrote to my sister. I invited her to our wedding, sent a photo of me happy with a diamond ring, but she only wrote a short, "Congratulations," and that was it. Yes, as you guessed, she didn't come to my wedding. At first, I was very offended, but then I realized that she was just jealous. My life has turned out much better than hers. Now I am the wife of a rising football star. Moreover, we are rich, and I went everywhere with him around the world to games. My parents were happy for me and worried about Lynn at the same time. I didn't really know what was going on with her, but I heard from my mother that she was all about studying and living on it. A couple of years later, I got pregnant. To be honest, Ben wasn't happy about the news. He wanted us to live by ourselves for the time being, but I didn't understand that because we had already lived together for 2 years. We did not deny ourselves anything. Went to different countries, cities, walked until the morning. We had fun, didn't have any worries. By then, I was ready to have a baby. I really wanted to become a young mother. And the night I got this great news, Ben came home from training, and I met him happy with dinner and a gift. I made a note for him that said we were going to have a baby. Ben was in a good mood. We had dinner, but when he found the note, his mood immediately changed. I hadn't expected this reaction, but I was angry. He tore it up and then shouted that he didn't want children yet, that he wasn't ready for me to have a child. At that moment, my whole world collapsed. I tried to explain that this is our baby, that we should be happy, that I'm also scared, but I want to become a mother. And then Ben said, "Just do it without me." I cried a lot. I couldn't imagine how. I went home to my parents and decided to stay with them for the time being. My mother insisted that I give birth. She said that our baby is not to blame for the fact that he doesn't have a father. My parents promised to help raise the child, and as luck would have it, we had severe financial difficulties at home, as work was tight. I didn't want to be a burden to anyone, and I still had a glimmer of hope that Ben would understand. But a week passed, then 2. He didn't show up, so I decided to go to him myself. When I arrived at his house, a strange girl opened the door for me. She introduced herself as his soulmate, said that she would be with him now. I could barely hold back my tears. And then Ben came out and said that if I decided to keep the baby, he would divorce me and not leave me a dime. I was shattered. I began to feel depressed, not knowing where to go. I went back to my parents, as there was no other way out. The only thing I was sure of was that I wanted to keep the baby. About a month later, when I had recovered a little, Lynn came to see my mom and dad. She had just finished the school year with excellent results and decided to visit her parents. Our meeting with her was unexpected for both of us. We embraced dryly, and for a long time we were silent sitting at the table. I didn't know if I should tell her about my life. My mom and dad asked her about her studies, and Lynn said that everything was difficult for her. But then she quipped that if she had been born beautiful like me, she would have had fewer problems. "Beauty is not happiness," I said to her, and she said to me with such an offensive, "What are you saying? You married a rich football player, and I have to tear my claws out to pass the next exam, and somehow then find a job to live until the next salary." Her words sounded like accusations. My mother tried to reprimand her, but I stopped her. I got up from the table and showed her my stomach. "He left me, as you can see, despite my appearance," I told her, and then burst into tears and went to my room. After a while, Lynn came to see me. She was silent at first, and then asked how it happened. I told her everything, and it was so unusual to share problems with my sister, because we never did such a thing. I started crying again, and she sat so awkwardly closer, and then she hugged me, and I didn't hold back my emotions anymore. Lynn promised me that night that she would definitely help me win back some of the money. "If he doesn't want to be with you, he has to help, like the father of a child. I know that as a lawyer," she said. And Lynn kept her promise. She was with me at every trial, protecting my interests. Lynn argued in court. She talked to Ben, his lawyer, and answered all questions clearly and competently. That's when I really saw my sister for who she is. Her intelligence, strength, and firmness of character, I was proud of her. A few months later, my daughter was born, and I named her Lena, after her aunt. A lot has changed since then. We managed to win the trial, and Ben is now providing for the baby and me. After a couple of years, Lynn graduated and became a certified professional. She succeeded in her career, won cases that she took on, and I was always very proud of her. Imagine how much our relationship has changed. Now we were no longer the same rivals. On the contrary, now we were rooting for each other. My sister doted on my child. She just adored her. And when my daughter grew up, Lena persuaded me to go to college. I was ashamed to do it, but she persuaded me, explaining that it's never too late to start learning. She was right. Now I attend school in the evening while my parents look after the child. I decided to train as a fashion designer to come up with outfits for people of any shape. I think this is just what I needed. Lynn let me work on her a little, and I changed her hair color, her clothing style, and now I don't even recognize her. She's just beautiful. I was once again convinced that everything happens for a reason. What do you guys think? My mother, a tattoo artist, covered me with tattoos. Hello, everyone. My name is Kaylee. Do any of you have a tattoo artist as a mom? I agree, this is generally rare, but I have one. And yes, she covered me with tattoos herself. How did this happen? Now I will tell you. All you have to do is like the video of my story. Do not forget to share it with your friends, write comments under the video, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel. So initially, my mother is an artist. She has always drawn beautifully, and she has a great talent that can be envied. She didn't really like studying at school, but she excelled at drawing lessons. She was even better than the teacher. She always drew wall newspapers, posters, in general, actively participated in the creative life of the school, for which she was given good grades. She then went to an art institute or something. My mom was the best there, and 2 years later, she met a guy named Chris. She fell in love with him at first sight, but her parents were against it. My mother trusted her heart, so despite the prohibitions and reproaches, they got married. And then I was born. Yes, these are my parents. My father was from a poor family, which is why my grandparents still do not accept him, although it has been a very long time. It was really hard for them. They didn't earn much, and they still had to study. Anyway, my dad dropped out of school and went looking for a job. He drew portraits to order, but this money was still not enough, so he decided to try doing tattoos. At first, this idea seemed dubious to my mother. Plus, you also had to pay to be trained. But they took a chance and Dad learned, and then gradually began to take orders. And things went well. After a few years, he worked in the best salon in the city, on a level with other professionals. And a few years later, he had his own tattoo studio. By this time, we were well on our feet. I grew up, went to school, and my mother, so as not to sit idle, also decided to go to work. She was looking for a job by her profession, as she had a diploma, but nothing good was found. And when she came out of the 30th unsuccessful interview, she came up with an interesting idea. Mom went to Dad's work, brought him lunch, and watched as he finished giving a tattoo to one of his clients. When Dad finished, he asked how her work was going. My mom sadly replied that she wasn't working, and then she was like, "Teach me how to do a tattoo." Dad almost choked on his food. This statement was very unexpected. He asked if she was sure that she wanted this, and my mother said a firm yes. From that moment on, they worked together. My father taught my mother. She practiced first on artificial leather, then began to gain a client base. Since my mother had talent, she also learned quickly. I was proud of them because they were able to stand on their own 2 feet and provide food for our family. When the school found out how my parents worked, the teachers were outraged, made unhappy faces, and the guys threw questions about whether she could get them tattoos and why I don't have any. I never thought about that before. I thought it was optional, even though my parents have tattoos. A few of them. I came home and immediately said that I wanted a tattoo. My mom and dad lost their minds. At first, they were indignant for a long time, but then they realized that they could not say no. You can understand why. Then my father said that he would allow me to get a tattoo with one condition, that it would be done either by him or by my mother. And I agreed. I was given until the weekend to choose a drawing and think about it properly, as well as to consult with my parents. All week I was racking my brain, choosing a large, then a small drawing. I could not decide. Then my mother came up to me. She advised me to make a small one, try to get used to it, to the sensations. To be honest, I was scared. Although my parents told me in detail how the process would take place, I was still worried, but it was normal. Then came Saturday. I went to the salon with my parents and asked my mother to make my first tattoo, and she agreed. They asked me again if I was ready and if I had made a conscious decision, And when they said yes, my mother invited me to sit down. In fact, I was more worried, and after 30 minutes, I had a tattoo of a small flower on my arm. It looked neat, unassuming, and I was pleased. It took about a week for the tattoo to heal. It itched, but I took good care of it. At first, I couldn't get enough of it. It's like when you buy yourself a cool new thing, only this is always with you. I often got questions from my friends. What if the tattoo gets boring? What to do then? In general, they can be taken off, but why? That is why my parents asked me if I was sure about the choice of the tattoo and if my decision was really consciously made. When everything was completely healed, the thought crept into my mind. What if I had more? My father and mother asked the same questions and invited me to the salon. This time I made a bigger drawing on my leg. I had a wolf's mouth all over my thigh. This drawing was in color, so I was worked on for several hours in a row, and not at once. My mother did a great job. She clearly displayed all the details, like she did with all her clients. In some places I was a little sore, but in general, the sensations were tolerable. Finally, when the work was completely finished, there was another drawing on my leg, and it looked just bomb. And the funny thing is that 6 months later, I thought about another tattoo. It became like an addiction. My father told me about it. Lots of his clients often come for him for new tattoos after getting one. So, in a total of 2 years, my mother gave me about 20 tattoos. My arms, legs, stomach, neck, and lower back were all clogged up. At school, my teachers told me off, but my parents stood up for me, and that was what I liked the most. Do I consider my body beautiful? Yes, but it also warms me to think that my mother did all this work for me. Isn't it wonderful? Now her work will always remain with me. Would you take a chance like this? What would you tattoo yourself with? I found out the whole truth about our nanny. Hello, everyone. My name is Nora. Not so long ago, my parents replaced my nanny, and all because the last one left. My father and mother work very hard and come home late, so they decided to hire a person who will look after me, cook, and help me do my homework. But over time, I noticed that we were missing food and some other things. I did not tell my parents about everything yet, but decided to look for more proof. And here's what I found. By the way, do not forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share my story with your friends. So, last year, when the last nanny left, I encouraged my parents, said that I can cope without one because I am already 12 years old, so I can look after myself. They didn't like the idea at first, but I persuaded them not to spend the money, but to at least try it out. After much thought, my parents agreed. But it was more complicated than I'd imagined. Before, when I came home from school, a hot lunch was already waiting for me on the table. I ate quickly, had a little time to rest, and then sat down to my homework. My old nanny explained the material to me so easily and simply that what I did not understand at school took a maximum of 2 hours to complete at home. I didn't think it would be so hard without help. Now that I was on my own, I would come home and warm up my own dinner. Then while I ate, clean up after myself, do some chores around the house. Then there was no time to rest, and sometimes I didn't even get to finish my homework. I would fall asleep right at the table, and my academic performance began to suffer. Then it was decided to look for a nanny again. After a couple of weeks of searching, we found a suitable candidate. Her resume was perfect, and both my mom and I liked her. Her name was Grace. She was 47 years old, and I really liked her at first. She was so adept at doing homework, cooking for me, helping me with my lessons, and I was back to my old routine. And she also baked great goodies that my last nanny couldn't make. I was grateful for her, and that we'd found her. The first week was just perfect, but then I started noticing some oddities behind her. Once, when I came home from school earlier than usual, I came into the house and came across some packages at the entrance. There were some containers, but I didn't look at them. Immediately, Grace came out to meet me. She was very scared at the sight of me, and then I asked what the packages were for. Grace was confused, and then said that she had just come from the store. She put the groceries in the refrigerator, and I saw the cheese she took out. You can't buy it in a local store because it was given to us, imported from another country. My dad loved cheese, so it was a gift for him. I didn't pay it much notice and went to change. A couple of days later, I noticed that the cheese wasn't in the refrigerator, although Dad could not eat such a huge piece so quickly. At breakfast, he once asked where his cheese was, and my nanny replied that it was all used up. Dad was upset, but not too much. The same evening, when my nanny asked to go out for 2 hours on business, I was left at home alone. I was hungry and reached into the refrigerator, opened it, and saw that it was almost empty. This doesn't usually happen with us. My mother always makes sure that the refrigerator is stocked. When the nanny came back, I asked her where all the groceries were, but she said we were all out. Did we really eat that much? I thought to myself. Then I went to my room to pick out clothes for school tomorrow and couldn't find a skirt I hadn't worn in a long time. I asked the nanny if she'd seen it, but she shook her head. Like, no. It was strange because I didn't lend it to anyone. The next day, my mother left me some money on the table before she left for work. I didn't have my first class, so I went to school a bit later than usual. When I went downstairs, the money had vanished. The nanny was cleaning up and said she hadn't seen it. This already seemed strange, and I decided to observe her closer. I said I was going to school, but I instead hid on the roof of the house. Within 10 minutes, my nanny came out of the house with bags in her hands, got into her car, and drove somewhere. I managed to write to my friend, Kira, to come to me in her car. We followed my nanny. We drove for a long time, about 30 minutes. Then I saw that my nanny was selling our things to some dealer. What? She steals our things and sells them? I asked indignantly. Kira covered my mouth and took a few pictures on her phone. We went to school. Then after school, I came home again, where Grace was cooking dinner and acting like her usual self. I opened the refrigerator and saw that it was almost empty again, even though we had just bought groceries yesterday. Then I rummaged in my closet and counted 5 things that were missing from there. When my nanny asked me what I was doing, I said I was cleaning. I wanted to catch her red-handed. Then I did. On the same day, Kira arrived again. I told the nanny that we would go for a walk and left the house. Grace pulled out again and headed for the next block. We followed her, and I saw her carrying some of my mom's things in bags, more groceries and some other stuff. I was so angry that when she got out of the car at someone else's house, I ran out to her and started screaming. I called her a thief and said I would turn her in to the police. Then a little girl came out of the house. "Mom, did you bring us food?" "Who is this?" she asked, looking at me. My nanny begged me. She asked me to come into the house and promised to tell me everything. It was such an old house. There were 3 children inside. The oldest was 13 years old, and then a little boy and girl. She told us that they were her children, that her husband had left her, and that she had to take food from us to feed them because she didn't have enough money. She begged me not to tell the police and promised to resign. At first, I wanted to tell my mother, but then I felt so sorry for her. Then Kira ran in. She filmed everything on her phone and then said that she should come up with an honest income. After all, this is theft at the end of the day. Grace vowed not to do it again, and we had a recording to make sure. The very next day, she quit. I asked for the things she stole from us, and then I told her that she should find another job, a better paying one. I told my mother that I had ruined my things and thrown them away. I haven't seen Grace since. Do you think I should have reported her to the police? And what would you have done in my place?
Howdy, my name's Zach. And if you met me when we're in the company of a very cool girl, then don't be surprised. She's crazy about me. Would it bother you if I told you that this cute looking student is older than me? Now, I'll tell you about how it turned out that she dotes on me, and you'll understand everything. Stay with me. Watch the story. Write your opinion in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. My parents and I recently moved in with my grandmother, whose name is Hillary. She doesn't like me to call her Granny. She prefers us to call her by her first name. Hillary has been living alone in the big house since grandfather passed away. She got married early, gave birth to my mother when she was only 18 years old. My grandmother used to live like everyone else. She looked like an older woman, loved to eat meat, fed for slaughter whenever came to visit. But then there was a change in her. The fact is that my grandmother was diagnosed with a disease a few years ago. She was associated with poor nutrition, a sedentary lifestyle, and when he died, it was a big blow, especially for her. Hillary loved her husband, and she indulged his whims in every way, especially in the kitchen. The most favorite thing they did was to eat at night. Yes, they loved fast food, which is strange because my grandparents are against such food, but not they. And when she was left alone, grandmother decided to take care of herself. She was only 53 years old at the time. We thought it was temporary that she would go on a diet, and she always talking about it, just for a short time and then go back to work. My mother was sure that at this age, it's difficult to change habits. And then, last year, my parents told me that we were moving in with her because they didn't want her to be alone. Moreover, my grandmother has a big house, and my father found a better place to work in the city. We all agreed. I adored my grandmother, and she spoiled me. We haven't seen each other for a couple of years. Imagine our face when at the airport when we were approached by a girl who looked like an 18-year-old student. She was shouting from far away, "Zach, my boy!" So only she said. And suddenly, a tiny girl runs up on me. In tight pants with a beautiful short hairstyle, she hugged me so hard that I almost choked. "Mom, what happened to you?" My mother asked in surprise. I couldn't even blink in surprise. There was another person standing in front of us, as my grandmother had lost at least 20 kilograms. She was so young, so renewed, so energetic. She moved quickly, as if the second youth had awakened in her. Everyone was surprised when they had heard me call her Grandma. She immediately asked me to say Hillary, and that was all. These changes were good for her. Grandma learned to drive and got behind the wheel of Grandpa's SUV. It suited her very well. When we arrived home, we saw that she had changed everything there. A new renovation in a modern minimalist style only added another youth. Now, Hillary strictly followed the trends, both in clothing and in everyday life. For lunch, we had a diet meal, a minimum of meat, more greens, vegetables, and fruits. My grandmother gave up alcohol and smoking. Yes, she and grandfather had smoked together for many years. I liked looking at her. The only thing she didn't put away were grandfather's photos. They were all over the place. I was happy for her, and my parents complimented her too. She just smiled. A day later, we decided to go for a walk with her. I found out that she walks like this for 2 hours every day, going up the street and running back. By the way, yes, in the house, she made up a mini sport room, equipped with sports equipment to practice without leaving the house. Every day, she would wake up at 6 and start the morning with a glass of water and exercise, and go to breakfast an hour later. It was so unlike her. "Why did you decide to change yourself so much?" I once asked, to which my grandmother replied that it was only after she lost a loved one that she realized how wrong they were living. I didn't want to change anything at first, but then I listened to myself and said that I wanted to live longer, to see my great grandchildren. She said, laughing and patting me on the shoulder. "We are what we eat," she said. I remembered those words. Hillary found a job at home, she mastered the computer, and now studied remote work, something in the field of online consultations. She taught the elderly, gave advice on nutrition, scheduled physical activities for each individual, and made a good living from it. And when we moved in with her, she had a lot of more fun because now she dragged me everywhere with her. I learned that my grandmother spends a lot of time on her appearance. That is, she works not only from the inside. In a week, she visited beauty salons 1 to 2 times, did all sorts of cosmetic procedures to rejuvenate the skin, and, she really managed it. She gave me a ride to school one day. My classmates saw her and began to whistle loudly, and then they threw questions at me, where I managed to pick up such a beauty. I just laughed and didn't say anything. A couple of days later, my grandmother invited me to dinner at her favorite cafe. We sat and chatted about something, and she suggested that I work with her, too, to learn how to advise and earn money. Then my classmates came up to us. They just sat down next to each other. Jack held out his hand, said his name, and then asked, "I haven't seen you before. Strange. Why?" After all, I know all the beauties in this city. My grandmother smiled, and I rolled my eyes. "Jack, you're at the wrong address," I said. And Grandma interrupted me. "You don't know me, grandson, because I'm 40 years older than you," she said, laughing. Jack choked, made a surprised face, and then looked at me. "This is my grandmother," I told him. He immediately jumped out of his seat, apologized 100 times, and then told me that I would see you in class and left. It was quite a funny situation, and I realized once again how proud I was of my grandma. It was then that I decided to help her to learn how to help people become better, younger, and more beautiful. Isn't that cool? What do you think?